The stars looked different from the bridge of the new Seoul. Commander Dae-hyun stood at the main window watching the endless black space filled with distant lights. He had been staring at stars for most of his life, but they never got old. Each one was a sun like the one that warmed Earth. Each one might have planets with life. "Commander, we are getting close to Kepler 442b, said pilot So-young from her seat at the controls. Her voice was calm and steady like always. She had been flying ships for 15 years and nothing seemed to worry her. Dae-hyun nodded and walked back to his chair. The new Seoul was not the biggest ship in space, but it was fast and strong. It carried supplies to the human colonies on the edge of known space. The colonies were small and far from Earth, but they were growing. Humans were good at making homes in hard places. "How long until we reach the planet?" asked Dae-hyun. "About 6 hours, sir," answered So-young. "The weather looks good for landing." Dae-hyun looked around the bridge. Engineer Taemin was checking the ship systems at his station. Everything was working fine as usual. Communications officer Hae-jin was listening to radio signals from space. Mostly it was just empty noise, but sometimes they heard messages from other ships or space stations. The human ships were different from the ones used by other species in the galaxy. The aliens had ships that could do amazing things. They could bend space and time, they could become invisible. They could move faster than light in ways that human science barely understood. Human ships were simpler. They were built to last, and easy to fix when things went wrong. "Commander, I am getting something strange on the radio," said Hae-jin suddenly. Her face looked worried as she listened to her headphones. "It sounds like a distress call, but the signal is very weak." Dae-hyun walked over to her station. "Can you make it clearer?" Hae-jin worked with her controls for a few minutes. The static got quieter and they could hear a voice. It was speaking in the Villani language. The Villani were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. They could read minds and move things with their thoughts. They rarely asked for help. "What is it saying?" asked Dae-hyun. He knew a little Villani, but not enough to understand everything. "It says their research station is under attack," said Hae-jin. "Something is destroying everything. The signal keeps cutting out." Taemin looked up from his station. "Commander, that signal is coming from the Vega system. That is 3 days away from here." 3 days, repeated Dae-hyun. "By the time we get there, whatever happened will be over." "Sir," said Hae-jin. "The message says something else. It says entire stars are disappearing. Not just planets, whole star systems." The bridge became very quiet. Stars did not just disappear. Even human science knew that much. Stars lived for billions of years. They died slowly by exploding or burning out. They did not just vanish. "Change course for the Vega system," ordered Dae-hyun. "Best speed." So-young looked surprised. "Sir, that will use a lot of fuel, and we have supplies to deliver." "The supplies can wait," said Dae-hyun. "If the Villani are asking for help, something very bad is happening." The new Seoul turned away from Kepler 442b and headed toward the Vega system. The ship moved as fast as it could through space. For 3 days they traveled and heard nothing more from the Villani station. The radio was completely silent. When they finally reached Vega space, they found something that made no sense. The star was still there, burning bright and hot, but everything else was gone. The planets that should have been orbiting Vega were missing. The space stations and research labs were gone. Even the asteroids and space rocks had vanished. "This is impossible," whispered Taemin as he looked at his scanners. "There should be 6 planets here. There should be moons and space stations. Everything is gone." So-young flew the new Seoul carefully through the empty system. They found pieces of metal floating in space. The pieces were twisted and melted in ways that made no sense. They looked like they had been stretched and compressed at the same time. "There," said Hae-jin, pointing at the main screen. "I am reading one life sign. Very weak, but still alive." They found a small escape pod floating near where one of the planets used to be. Inside was a Villani scientist, barely alive. Taemin and Dae-hyun brought him to the medical bay. The alien was hurt badly, and his mind seemed confused. When the Villani finally woke up, his eyes were full of fear. He grabbed Daehyun by the arm and spoke in broken human language. They came from outside, the Villani said. From the dark, between galaxies. They eat everything, not just matter, not just energy. They eat the fabric that holds reality together. What came from outside? Asked Daehyun gently. The Devourers, whispered the Villani. Ancient things that survived the death of the universe before ours. They consume entire realities to stay alive. They are coming for this galaxy, all of it. The Villani scientist died a few hours later. His injuries were too severe and his mind had been damaged by whatever he had seen. Before he died, he kept repeating the same words over and over. They cannot be stopped with technology. They cannot be stopped with weapons. They can only be stopped by something that refuses to accept that stopping is possible. Daehyun sent a full report to Earth and to the Galactic Council. The response from the Council was exactly what he expected. They said the Villani scientist had been damaged by radiation. They said stars do not disappear and reality cannot be eaten. They said humans were letting their imagination run wild again. But back on Earth, Admiral Jiwoo read the report 3 times. She had fought in wars and seen impossible things become possible. She knew that sometimes the most unbelievable threats turned out to be real. Jiwoo called a meeting of the Human Space Command. In a room deep under the Earth, she gathered the best human military minds. She told them about the new Soul report and the dead Villani scientist. What do you think? She asked after telling the story. General Park spoke first. The aliens think we are primitive. They think our technology is crude and our methods are simple. Maybe that is exactly what we need to fight something that can destroy advanced technology. You mean fight ancient cosmic horrors with simple human stubbornness? Asked another officer. Why not? Said Jiwoo. Human stubbornness has gotten us this far. It got us to the stars when everyone said we were too primitive. Maybe it can save the galaxy too. The meeting lasted all night. By morning, the humans had made their decision. They would prepare for war against an enemy that most of the galaxy did not believe existed. They would use their greatest weapon, which was not any technology or advanced science. Their greatest weapon was the simple human refusal to give up. 3 months passed since the new Soul found the empty Vega system. Admiral Jiwoo had used that time to prepare the human fleet for something the rest of the galaxy still did not believe was real. But belief became fact when the first attacks began. Captain Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the Incheon watching his tactical display with growing alarm. Red dots were appearing and disappearing across the outer rim of the galaxy. Each red dot was a star system. Each disappearance meant billions of lives lost. How many systems have we lost in the past week? He asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Bo-ram. 17 confirmed, sir, she answered, while studying her screens. The Devourers are moving faster than we expected. At this rate, they will reach the core worlds in 6 months. The outer colonies were in panic. Entire populations were fleeing toward the center of the galaxy where they hoped the advanced species could protect them. The Galactic Council had finally admitted the threat was real, but their response was slow and confused. Sung-ho had spent the last month evacuating human colonies from the outer rim. Each evacuation was a race against time. The Devourers left. No survivors and no traces except empty space where star systems used to be. Captain, we have another distress call, reported the communications officer. The mining colony on Kepler 438c. They say something impossible is happening to their star. Set course immediately, ordered Sung-ho. Maximum speed, the Incheon, was one of the newer human ships built specifically to fight the Devourers. It was not as advanced as alien ships, but it had something the alien ships lacked. Every piece of equipment was designed to be operated by human determination as much as by technology. When they reached Kepler 438, they saw something that would have terrified any normal person. The star was still burning, but pieces of it seemed to be missing. Not destroyed or blown away, but simply not there anymore. Space itself looked wrong around the star, like reality was becoming thin. There are the Devourers, said Bo-ram, pointing at dark shapes moving near the star. They did not look like ships or creatures, they looked like holes in space that moved with purpose. All weapons ready, ordered Sung-ho. Remember what we learned in training, Do not think about whether this will work. Know that it will work. The human weapons were simple compared to alien technology, but they were powered by something aliens did not understand. When a human truly believed something would happen, they could make reality bend to match that belief. The Incheon fired its weapons at the nearest devourer. The energy beams hit the dark shape, and for a moment it flickered. The creature seemed confused, like it had never been hurt before. "It worked," shouted Boram. "Whatever these things are, they can be fought." But the victory was short. More devourers appeared around the Incheon. They began to attack not just the ship, but the space around it. Reality started to twist and bend. The stars in the distance began to look wrong. Sung-ho felt something he had never felt before. His own memories started to feel uncertain. Did he really grow up on Earth? Was he really a ship captain? The Devourers were not just attacking his ship. They were attacking his existence. "Focus on who you are," he shouted to his crew. "Remember your names. Remember your families. Do not let them erase you." The crew fought back in the only way humans knew how. They refused to be erased. They held on to their memories and their sense of self with fierce determination. Slowly, the reality around the ship became solid again. Meanwhile, on the research station, Busan Lab Dr. Min-ji was making a discovery that would change everything. She had been studying the remains of Devourer attacks for weeks. What she found was worse than anyone had imagined. "Dr. Kyung-soo, come look at this," she called to her research partner. Kyung-soo walked over to her workstation. On the screen were equations that hurt to look at. They seemed to twist and change when he tried to read them. "These are the quantum foundations of reality," explained Minji. "Every atom, every particle, every bit of energy exists because of these mathematical relationships. The Devourers are not just destroying matter. They are erasing the math that makes existence possible." "How can we fight something that can erase mathematics?" asked Kyung-soo. "Look at this data from the human ship encounters," said Minji. She brought up readings from the Incheon battle. "Human consciousness seems to create a stabilizing effect. When humans truly believe something exists, it becomes harder for the Devourers to erase it." The implications were staggering. Humans had always been considered the least advanced species in the galaxy, but their minds worked differently from alien minds. Where aliens relied on logic and technology, humans relied on faith and determination. Young engineer Jae-won was working in his laboratory when the news reached him. He had been trying to design better weapons to fight the Devourers. Now he realized weapons were not the answer. "What if we build ships that run on human belief?" he said to himself. "Ships that become more real the more determined the crew is." He began working on designs that made no sense to normal engineering. Engines powered by hope, shields strengthened by courage, weapons that fired concentrated determination. The first prototype was ready in 2 weeks. Test pilot Yoon Seo volunteered to fly it even though everyone expected it would fail. The ship looked normal on the outside, but inside everything was connected to the pilot's mind and heart. "I believe this ship will fly," said Yoon Seo as she started the engines. "I believe it will protect me. I believe it will come home." The ship lifted off smoothly, more smoothly than any human ship had ever flown before. When Yoon Seo believed the ship could go faster, it went faster. When she believed the shields were strong, they became stronger. She flew the ship directly at a small group of Devourers near Jupiter. The creatures tried to erase her ship from existence, but they could not. Yoon Seo believed too strongly in her mission. She believed too strongly in herself. The ship weapons fired beams of pure human determination. Where they hit the Devourers, the creatures flickered and weakened. For the first time since the attacks began, the Devourers retreated. Yoon Seo returned to base with proof that humans could fight these ancient horrors. But she also brought bad news. The Devourers were learning from each encounter. They were adapting to human determination just like they had adapted to alien technology. "We hurt them, but we did not stop them," she reported to the assembled commanders. "They are studying us now, learning how our minds work. The next battle will be much harder." Admiral Ji-woo listened to the report with mixed feelings. Humanity had found a way to fight the Devourers, but time was running out. The creatures were advancing toward the core worlds where trillions of lives waited in fear. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," she ordered. "Tell them we know how to fight these things, but we will need every human ship and every human crew member. This is going to be the fight of our lives." The message went out across human space. From Earth to the furthest colonies, the call went forth. Humanity was going to war against creatures that could erase reality itself. They would fight with the only weapon that mattered. They would fight with the burning flame of human determination that refused to be extinguished. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen anything like it. For the first time in their long history, the most advanced species in the galaxy were asking the humans for help. Admiral Jiwoo stood before representatives from dozens of worlds, all looking at her with expressions that mixed hope and doubt. The Vellani ambassador spoke first. His mental voice echoed in everyone's mind. "We have analyzed your reports about human resistance to devourer attacks. We do not understand how primitive emotional responses can affect quantum reality, but we cannot argue with the results. Our technology means nothing against these creatures," added the Korath representative. Her energy form flickered with frustration. "They consume our most advanced weapons like they were toys. Perhaps your crude methods will succeed where our sophistication has failed." Jiwoo kept her face calm even though the insult stung. She had expected this. The aliens still thought humans were primitive. They just needed primitive weapons to fight primitive enemies. "We will help you," she said clearly. "But we do this our way. Human crews will lead the attack formations. Human officers will make the tactical decisions. And every species will need to learn to fight like humans." The council chamber erupted in protests. The idea that advanced aliens would take orders from humans was almost unthinkable. But as the arguments went on, news arrived that made the choice simple. The Devourers had just destroyed the Altair system. They were now only 3 months away from the core worlds. Colonel Namsu had the hardest job in the galaxy. He was tasked with training alien soldiers to think and fight like humans. In training camps across dozens of worlds, he tried to teach creatures who had never known fear how to find courage in the face of impossible odds. The Korath were the most difficult students. They were beings of pure energy who had evolved past physical form millions of years ago. They thought in terms of mathematical certainty and logical outcomes. "You must stop calculating probabilities," Namsu told a group of Korath warriors. "Humans do not fight because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for even when victory is impossible." One of the Korath flickered in confusion. "But if victory is impossible, then fighting is illogical. Why would you choose to fail?" "Because choosing to fight changes the meaning of failure," explained Namsu. "When you fight for something bigger than yourself, failure becomes just another step toward success." The Vellani were easier to train but harder to convince. Their telepathic abilities let them feel human emotions directly, but they found those emotions overwhelming and chaotic. "Human minds are so loud," complained one Vellani student. "How do you think with so much feeling getting in the way?" "The feelings are not getting in the way," said Namsu. "The feelings are the way. When a human truly cares about something, that caring becomes a force that can change reality." Meanwhile, Dr. Hae-young was leading a team of scientists from every known species. They were trying to understand exactly what the Devourers were and where they had come from. What they discovered was worse than anyone had imagined. "They are not from this universe," she explained to the assembled researchers. "They are survivors from the universe that existed before ours. When that universe died in heat death, these creatures found a way to survive by consuming the quantum foundations of new realities." The alien scientists struggled to understand the implications. A Korath mathematician spoke up. "If they survived the death of an entire universe, how can we possibly defeat them?" "Because they made one mistake," said Hae-young. "They survived by becoming creatures of pure logic and mathematics. They understand how to manipulate reality through scientific principles. But they do not understand how consciousness can affect reality through belief and determination." The first major test of the new combined forces came at the Rigel system. Commander Yunji led a fleet of 200 ships from 12 different species. The human ships formed the center of the formation, while alien vessels provided support. Remember, what we practiced, Yunji broadcast to the entire fleet. Do not think about the odds. Do not calculate probabilities. Believe that we will win because we have no choice but to win. The Devourers came at them like a wave of living darkness. There were more of them than anyone had expected. They moved through space, erasing matter and energy as they advanced. The alien ships opened fire first. Their advanced weapons had some effect, but not enough. The Devourers absorbed most of the energy and kept coming. Then the human ships began their attack. Fire everything, ordered Yunji. Pour your hearts into those weapons. Make every shot count because the people we are protecting are counting on us. The human weapons were powered by more than just energy. They carried the hopes and fears and determination of their crews. Where the beams struck the Devourers, the creatures flickered and weakened. But it was not enough. There were too many Devourers, and they were adapting quickly to human tactics. The fleet began to take heavy losses. That was when something unexpected happened. The alien crews who had been training with humans began to feel something they had never experienced before. The Yod Korath started to care more about victory than about logical outcomes. The Villani started to believe in impossible things. A Korath captain broadcast to his crew, "We will not let these creatures destroy our homes. Logic says we cannot win, but logic has never faced human determination before." The change spread through the alien ships like fire. Creatures who had lived for thousands of years suddenly understood what it meant to refuse to surrender. Their weapons began to carry the same impossible power that human weapons possessed. The tide of battle turned. The Devourers found themselves facing not just human determination, but the combined will of dozens of species who had learned to believe in victory against impossible odds. When the last Devourer in the Rigel system was destroyed, the fleet had lost 60 ships and thousands of lives. But they had won their first major victory. More importantly, they had proven that the human way of thinking could spread to other species. News of the victory traveled quickly through the galaxy. On worlds that had never heard of human determination, species began to understand that some fights were worth fighting even when winning seemed impossible. The Devourers had spent millions of years consuming realities that relied on logic and science. Now they faced something they had never encountered before. An entire galaxy that refused to accept defeat. Dr. Hae-young studied the battle reports with growing excitement. "Do you see what is happening?" she asked her research team. "Human consciousness is not just resisting the Devourers. It is teaching other forms of consciousness to resist as well." "You mean determination is contagious?" asked a Villani scientist. "Exactly," said Hae-young. "Humans are not just fighting the Devourers. We are teaching the galaxy how to fight them. Every species that learns to think like humans becomes harder for the Devourers to erase." Back on Earth, Admiral Jiwoo received reports from a dozen different battle zones. Human-led fleets were winning victories across the Outer Rim. The advance of the Devourers had been slowed, and in some places stopped completely. But she knew this was just the beginning. The creatures were ancient and cunning. They would adapt to this new threat just as they had adapted to everything else. The real test was still coming. "Send word to all human colonies," she ordered. "Every person who can hold a weapon or pilot a ship is needed. This galaxy taught us that we were not advanced enough to matter. Now we are going to teach it that advancement without determination is worthless." The galaxy was learning that in its darkest hour, salvation had come from the species everyone had overlooked. Humans were not the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but they were the only species that had never learned to accept the impossible. And now they were teaching everyone else how to stand tall and burn with purpose. The war had been going on for 8 months when the Devourers changed their tactics. They stopped attacking random star systems and began targeting human worlds specifically. They had learned that humans were the key to the galaxy's resistance, and they intended to remove that key permanently. General Wu Jin stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul, watching displays that showed the Devourers advancing on Earth itself. Never in human history had their homeworld faced such a threat. The creatures approaching were not just trying to conquer Earth. They wanted to erase it from existence completely. "How long until they reach the outer defenses?" asked Wu Jin. 6 days, sir, answered his aide, Major Kang Ho. "The Luna base and Mars station are already under attack. Admiral Chen reports they are holding, but barely." Wu Jin nodded grimly. The defenses around Earth were the strongest humanity had ever built. But they were designed to fight normal enemies with ships and weapons. The Devourers were something else entirely. President Jinneh had called an emergency meeting of the World Council. In the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, leaders from every nation on Earth gathered to make the hardest decision in human history. "The situation is clear," said Jinneh as she addressed the assembly. "The Devourers are coming for Earth. Our military estimates we can hold them off for maybe 2 weeks, but holding them here means the rest of the galaxy falls." The Brazilian president spoke first. "You are asking us to abandon our homeworld, to leave Earth defenseless while our people fight in distant stars." "I am asking you to trust in what makes us human," replied Jinneh. "We have always been the species that leaves home to protect others. Our ancestors left Africa to populate the world. Our grandparents left Earth to populate the stars. Now we must leave everything to save the universe." The debate went on for hours. Some leaders argued that humanity's first duty was to protect Earth. Others said that saving the galaxy meant nothing if humanity died in the process. But slowly consensus began to form around a terrible truth. If humanity stayed to defend Earth, they might save their world, but lose the war. If they left Earth to fight the Devourers, they might save the universe but lose their home. It was not really a choice at all. Lieutenant Commander Su Jin was on Luna base when the attacks began. She watched through the observation windows as dark shapes moved between Earth and the moon. They were not attacking yet, just surrounding the system like predators studying their prey. "Why are they waiting?" asked Chief Petty Officer Dong Hyun as he joined her at the window. "They want us to be afraid," answered Su Jin. "They want us to think about what we are going to lose. They do not understand that humans fight harder when we have something to protect." The first direct assault came at 0300 Earth time. The Devourers struck Luna base with weapons that bent space itself. Parts of the base simply stopped existing. Walls and floors and entire sections vanished as if they had never been built. But the humans on Luna base did not panic. They had been trained for this. As reality twisted around them, they held tight to their sense of self and their mission. They refused to let the Devourers erase them from existence. "All weapons fire at will," ordered Su Jin. "Make them remember that humans do not go quietly." The base weapons were powered by the determination of their crews. Each shot carried not just energy but the collective will of everyone on Luna base. The Devourers found themselves facing attacks that they could not simply absorb or deflect. On Earth itself, something remarkable was happening. As the Devourers surrounded the planet, the entire world began to respond. Not just the military or the government, but every human being on Earth. Dr. Young Min had been studying human consciousness for his entire career. Now he was seeing something that amazed him. "The entire planet is resonating," he told his research team. 8 billion human minds all focused on the same goal. The determination to survive is creating a reality anchor around Earth. The planet itself was becoming harder for the Devourers to affect. Every human who refused to give up made Earth a little more real, a little more solid. The creatures found that their reality-warping weapons had no effect on the world below, but the cost was terrible. In space, the human fleet was paying the price for Earth's protection. Ships that ventured too far from the planet's reality anchor were quickly destroyed. Crews that tried to extend the anchor through their own determination burned out and died. Captain Hanul led a squadron of 12 ships in a desperate mission to break through the Devourer blockade. She knew it was likely a suicide mission, but someone had to get word to the rest of the galaxy about what was happening at Earth. "I believe we will succeed," she told her squadron over the radio. "I believe it because we have to believe it. The galaxy is counting on us." The squadron flew directly into the heart of the Devourer formation. The creatures tried to erase the ships from existence, But the pilots held on to their mission with absolute certainty. They knew they would succeed because failure was not an option they could accept. 3 ships made it through the blockade. Hanul was not among the survivors. Her ship had been destroyed, but not before she transmitted the crucial information to Admiral Jiwoo's fleet. The message was simple. Earth could protect itself, but only as long as humans remained focused on survival. If humanity scattered to fight throughout the galaxy, Earth would become vulnerable. If humanity stayed to protect Earth, the rest of the galaxy would fall. Jiwoo read the message 3 times before she fully understood what Hanul was telling her. Humanity had to make a choice between their world and their universe. They could not save both. The decision came from an unexpected source. On Earth, civilians were volunteering to join the Space Forces in unprecedented numbers. Elderly people who had never left Earth were demanding to be trained as ship crews. Children barely old enough to work were applying to serve on military vessels. They understood something their leaders were still struggling with. This was not a war that could be won by professional soldiers. This was a war that required every human being to participate. The entire species had to commit to victory, or the Devourers would eventually win. President Jin-A made the announcement that changed human history. Every person capable of serving in space will join the war effort. We will leave Earth defended by those who cannot travel and protected by the reality anchor created by human determination. The rest of us will go to the stars. Families said goodbye, knowing they might never see each other again. Grandparents hugged grandchildren and told them to be brave. Parents kissed their children and promised to come home even though they knew the promise might be impossible to keep. But they went anyway because that was what humans did. They protected others even when the cost was everything they held dear. The evacuation of Earth took 3 weeks. Millions of humans left their home world carrying only what they needed to fight an enemy that could erase reality. They traveled to staging areas throughout the galaxy where human determination would serve as anchors for the final assault. Behind them, Earth glowed with the combined will of every human who remained. The planet had become more real than anything else in the galaxy, a solid point of existence that the Devourers could not touch. But the real battle was just beginning. In deep space, human fleets were gathering for an assault that would determine the fate of everything. They carried with them the hopes of their world, and the desperate need to prove that some things were worth any sacrifice. The Devourers had spent millions of years consuming realities. Now they faced a species that would rather burn themselves out completely than let the darkness win. The universe was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an unmovable will. The largest fleet in galactic history was gathering at the edge of known space. Admiral Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Hope, watching as ships from every corner of the galaxy arrived for humanity's final gambit. Human vessels formed the core of the massive armada, but they were joined by alien ships whose crews had learned to think like humans. The plan was desperate and probably impossible. The Devourers had consumed half the galaxy, while humanity was learning to fight them. Now the remaining forces would attempt something that had never been tried before. They would attack the Devourers at their source. Dr. Sejin had spent months studying the Devourers to find their weakness. She was old now, and this would be her final mission. Her research had revealed the location of the dimensional anchor that allowed the Devourers to exist in this reality. The anchor point is located at coordinates that should not exist, she explained to the assembled fleet commanders. It is a place where our universe touches the void between realities. The Devourers use it as a gateway to bring more of their kind into our dimension. What happens if we destroy it? Asked Do-hyun. Destroying it is impossible, answered Sejin. The anchor is not a thing that can be destroyed. It is a fundamental connection between dimensions, but it can be replaced. The implications of her words sank in slowly. Someone would have to take the place of the dimensional anchor. Someone would have to become the guardian between realities, holding back the Devourers forever. How many people would it take? Asked Commander Mi-kyung. We estimate at least 10,000 human consciousnesses fully committed to the task, said Sejin. They would exist forever as guardians holding the dimensional barriers stable, aware but alone. conscious but cut off from normal existence. The fleet commanders fell silent. They were asking 10,000 people to sacrifice not just their lives, but their entire existence. To spend eternity holding back the darkness so others could live in the light. The journey to the dimensional anchor would take 6 months. The Devourers grew stronger the closer the fleet got to their source. Ships would be lost daily as crews burned out trying to maintain reality's coherence in the face of increasing chaos. Mi Kyung volunteered to lead the first wave. Her ship, Soul's Fire, was one of the new vessels powered entirely by human determination. Her crew had trained for months to synchronize their will and focus it into a weapon against unreality. "We will clear the path for the main fleet," she told Do-hyun before departure, "no matter what it costs." Behind Soul's Fire flew hundreds of similar vessels. Each one carried crews who had accepted that they would probably not survive the mission. But survival was not the point anymore. The point was making sure others could survive. The first month of the journey was almost routine. The Devourers had not yet realized what the human fleet was attempting. They attacked in small groups using standard tactics. The human ships held formation and fought them off without major losses. But as they traveled deeper into Devourer territory, the nature of reality itself began to change. Stars looked wrong. Space felt unstable. The laws of physics became suggestions, rather than rules. Lieutenant Beho was on duty in the navigation section of Soul's Fire when the first major reality distortion hit. He watched his instruments go crazy as space folded in on itself around the ship. "Navigation is impossible, sir," he reported to Mi Kyung. "The stars are changing position faster than I can track them." "Then we navigate by faith," replied Mi Kyung. "We know where we need to go. Believe that we will get there, and we will." The human crews had trained for this. When normal navigation failed, they relied on their inner compass. Their determination to reach the dimensional anchor became a form of guidance that the Devourers could not disrupt. By the third month, they were losing ships every day. The reality distortions were too strong for some crews to resist. Mi Kyung watched good people and fine ships simply fade from existence as their crews lost the ability to believe in themselves, but the survivors pressed on. Each loss made them more determined to succeed. Each sacrifice reminded them why they were making this impossible journey. Dr. Si-jin was working around the clock in her research lab aboard the Eternal Hope. The closer they got to the dimensional anchor, the more she learned about what they would face there. "The anchor point exists in a place where normal reality breaks down," she told Do-hyun. "Anyone who tries to replace it will experience existence in ways that human minds were never meant to handle. They will be conscious of every dimension simultaneously. Past, present, and future will have no meaning." "Will they suffer?" asked Do-hyun. "I do not know," admitted Se-jin. "Suffering, as we understand it, requires time to have meaning. They will exist beyond time, beyond space, beyond everything we consider normal. Whether that is suffering or something else entirely is impossible to say." As the fleet approached the 5th month of their journey, they began to encounter Devourers in massive numbers. The creatures had finally understood what humanity was trying to do, and they were massing every available force to stop them. The battles were unlike anything that had ever been fought in the history of the galaxy. Ships did not just exchange fire, they exchanged fundamental concepts of existence. When human weapons struck Devourers, they were firing concentrated belief in reality. When Devourer weapons struck human ships, they were firing concentrated nothingness. Captain Ji-hoon commanded one of the escort vessels protecting the research ships. He had been fighting the Devourers for over a year, and he understood them better than most humans. They were not evil in any way humans could comprehend. They were simply hungry and alien beyond imagination. "They do not hate us," he explained to his crew during a brief break between battles. "They do not even really see us as enemies. We are just obstacles preventing them from feeding. They will consume everything not out of malice, but because that is what they are." "Then why are we fighting them?" asked his weapons officer. "Because we choose to exist," replied Ji-hoon. "They choose to consume. When those two choices meet, one of them has to win." In the final month of the journey, they reached the edge of reality itself. Here, space and time became meaningless concepts. The dimensional anchor appeared as a massive distortion in existence, a wound in reality that had never healed. Through the wound, they could see into the void between universes. Ancient things moved in that darkness, devourers beyond counting waiting for their chance to enter this reality and consume everything within it. "This is where we make our stand," announced Do-hyun to the entire fleet. Every ship, every crew, every person who has come this far knew this moment would come. The galaxy is counting on us to seal this wound permanently. But sealing it would require volunteers to take the place of the dimensional anchor. 10,000. People would have to merge their consciousness with the barriers between realities. They would become the guardians holding back the darkness forever. Captain Ji-hoon was the first to volunteer. "I will do it," he said simply. "My family is dead. My world is gone. Let my existence have meaning by protecting others." But he was not alone. Thousands of other humans stepped forward. Young and old, military and civilian, they all understood what they were choosing. They would sacrifice their individual existence to become part of something greater. Mi-kyung joined the volunteers. So did Dr. Sejin, despite her advanced age. Pilots and engineers, soldiers and scientists, all volunteering to spend eternity as guardians at the edge of existence. "You understand what this means?" Do-hyun asked them. "You will be conscious but cut off from normal life. You will exist forever, watching the boundaries between dimensions, but never able to return to the existence you know." "We understand," replied Ji-hoon, speaking for all the volunteers. "This is what we came here to do. This is what humans do. We stand guard so others can sleep safely." The final battle was about to begin. The Devourers sensed what humanity was planning, and they threw everything they had at the fleet. The fate of not just the galaxy but all of reality would be decided in the next few hours, and 10,000 humans were ready to burn forever to make sure the light would never be extinguished. The final battle began at the edge of existence, where reality became so thin that thoughts took physical form. Captain Ji-hoon watched from the bridge of his ship as the Devourers emerged from the void in numbers beyond counting. They filled the space around the dimensional anchor like living darkness, determined to protect their gateway into the galaxy. Admiral Do-hyun gave the order that would decide the fate of everything. "All ships attack. Clear the path to the anchor point. Make way for the volunteers." The battle was unlike anything that had ever been fought. When human weapons fired, they shot beams of pure determination. When Devourer weapons responded, they fired concentrated emptiness that tried to erase the very concept of the targets they struck. Around Ji-hoon, reality twisted and reformed with each exchange of fire. He saw his crew members flicker in and out of existence as the Devourers tried to unmake them. But the humans held on to their sense of self with desperate strength. "Remember who you are," Ji-hoon called out to his crew. "Remember why we are here. Do not let them erase your purpose." The Fur, ship weapons officer, was a young woman named Su-min, who had joined the fleet straight from her home colony. She had never fired a weapon in anger before this war began. Now she was shooting at creatures that existed outside normal reality. "Target the big one," ordered Ji-hoon, pointing at a massive devourer that seemed to be coordinating the attack. "Put everything we have into that shot." Su-min focused all of her will on the targeting system. She believed absolutely that her shot would hit its target. She believed that it would hurt the creature. She believed it because believing anything else would mean the death of everything she had ever loved. The weapon fired with the concentrated force of her determination. The beam struck the devourer, and for the first time in the battle, one of the ancient creatures screamed. It was a sound that existed in dimensions humans could not see, but they felt it in their souls. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human crews pushed their ships and themselves beyond normal limits. They fought not just with weapons, but with the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Commander Mi-kyung led the first wave of volunteer ships toward the dimensional anchor. Her vessel Soul's Fire had been modified for the final mission. Its hull was inscribed with the names of every human who had died fighting the Devourers. As they approached the anchor point, reality became increasingly unstable. Mi Kyung could see through the dimensional wound into the void beyond. Ancient devourers moved in that darkness like sleeping giants, waiting to feed on another universe. "This is it," she announced to her crew. "When we merge with the anchor, we become the barrier that holds them back. We become the guardian standing between the light and the darkness." Behind Soul's fire flew 9,999 other volunteer ships. Each one carried people who had chosen to sacrifice their individual existence to save everything else. Dr. Si Jin was aboard one of those ships despite her advanced age. She had insisted on joining the volunteers even though her colleagues argued she was too valuable to lose. "Knowledge means nothing if there is no one left to use it," she had said. "Better to ensure there will always be someone to learn." The Devourers threw everything they had at the approaching volunteers. Reality warped and twisted as the ancient creatures tried to prevent humans from reaching the dimensional anchor. But the volunteers pressed forward, driven by determination that bordered on madness. Ji-hoon felt his ship begin to dissolve as they approached the anchor point. The boundaries between matter and energy became meaningless. He could feel his crew's consciousness starting to merge with the fabric of space-time itself. "Hold together," he called out, even though normal speech was becoming impossible. "Remember what we are doing. We are becoming the Eternal Guard." The first volunteer ships reached the dimensional anchor and something magnificent happened. Instead of being destroyed, the ships and their crews began to merge with the barrier between dimensions. They became part of the structure that held reality together. Mi Kyung felt her individual consciousness expand beyond anything she had ever imagined. She was suddenly aware of every dimension, every possible timeline, every potential future. She could see the past and the future simultaneously. She could feel the thoughts of every living being in the galaxy, but most importantly, she could feel the other volunteers joining her. 10,000 human minds merging into a collective guardian that spanned the boundaries of existence. They were no longer individuals, but they were still human in the ways that mattered most. The Devourers found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. The dimensional anchor was now protected not by abstract mathematical principles, but by conscious will. The volunteers were not just blocking the gateway, they were actively choosing to keep it closed. Every time the Devourers tried to force their way through the barrier, they met the combined determination of 10,000 humans who refused to let them pass. The ancient creatures found that their reality-warping powers had no effect on beings who existed beyond normal space and time. The battle in normal space continued for 3 more hours. Without reinforcements from the void, the Devourers in the galaxy began to weaken. Human and alien ships pressed their attack, driving the creatures back toward the dimensional anchor. But the anchor was now sealed. The Eternal Guard held it closed with absolute determination. The remaining Devourers found themselves cut off from their source, trapped in a reality they could not fully consume. Admiral Do-hyun watched as the last major Devourer formation was destroyed by a combined fleet of human and alien ships. The creatures that had seemed invincible were finally defeated not by superior technology, but by the simple human refusal to give up. The war was over, but the victory came with a price that would never be forgotten. 10,000 humans now existed, forever at the edge of reality, holding back the darkness so others could live in the light. Colonel Eunji took command of the surviving human fleet for the long journey home. The ships that returned to the core worlds carried news of victory but also news of sacrifice. The galaxy had been saved, but at a cost that would be remembered for all time. When the fleet reached Earth, they found the planet still glowing with the collective will of humanity. The people who had remained behind had spent a year focusing their determination on keeping their world real and solid. They had succeeded beyond all expectations. The reunion was bittersweet. Families celebrated the return of their loved ones while mourning those who would never come home. But there was also pride in what humanity had accomplished. They had saved not just their own species, but every form of life in the galaxy. General Sang-woo was given the task of establishing the new Galactic Defense Force. The other species had learned from humanity's example, and they wanted humans to lead the organization that would protect against future threats. "We are not the strongest species," Sang-woo told the first graduating class of mixed species officers. We are not the smartest or the most advanced, but we understand something that technology cannot teach. We understand that some things are worth any sacrifice. The Eternal Guard became legendary throughout the galaxy. Children from dozens of species learned about the humans who chose to burn forever rather than let the darkness win. Their sacrifice became the foundation for a new understanding of courage and determination. On Earth, monuments were built not to celebrate victory, but to remember the cost of freedom. The names of the 10,000 volunteers were inscribed in stone that would last forever. Below their names was a simple message that captured the essence of what they had done. They chose to stand eternal watch so others could live in peace. In the deepest reaches of space where reality grows thin, the Eternal Guard maintains their vigil. They exist beyond time and space, aware of everything that happens in the galaxy they saved. Sometimes when young humans face impossible odds, they say they can hear whispers from the edge of existence. The whispers remind them that humans do not surrender. They endure. They adapt. They protect others even when the cost is everything they hold dear. The galaxy learned that day that in its darkest moment one species stood tall, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple burning conviction that some things are worth any sacrifice. And that flame burns eternal. It burns in the hearts of every species that learned courage from humanity. It burns in the stars that still shine because the devourers were stopped. It burns in the Eternal Guard who chose to spend forever protecting the light. The universe had faced its greatest threat and survived, not because of advanced weapons or cosmic powers, but because of the most human trait of all, the absolute refusal to let evil win no matter what the cost. In the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.